Blake Harrison stood silently at the floor-to-ceiling windows of his Manhattan penthouse. The city stretched out beneath him like a blanket of diamonds. From the outside, it was a dream view, endless lights, towering skyscrapers, and the heartbeat of New York pulsing in the night. But to Blake, it felt cold, distant, like a painting behind glass. At just 35, Blake was a self-made tech mogul, founder of a revolutionary AI startup that had shaken the industry. His sharp instincts and obsession with perfection had taken him from a dorm room in Ohio to boardrooms overlooking the skyline. Magazine covers, interviews, features, his face was everywhere. People envied his rise, admired his genius, and analyzed his next moves. But none of that mattered much to Blake anymore, because behind all the glossy features and champagne toasts, he felt alone. Every interaction in his life seemed to revolve around something transactional, partnerships, investments, favors. Even those closest to him spoke in terms of opportunities and outcomes. It was exhausting. The only one who didn't ask for anything was Duke. Duke, his golden retriever, had been his constant for almost a decade. Through brutal 18-hour workdays, late-night failures, and rare moments of quiet, Duke was there, loyal, calm, and completely uninterested in the zeros in Blake's bank account. One crisp October morning, with a rare gap in his back-to-back meetings, Blake decided to walk Duke himself. Normally, his assistant arranged walkers through a high-end service, but today, he just wanted a little peace. The park was nearly empty, sunbeams streaming through thinning leaves. Duke, nose to the ground, suddenly pulled hard on the leash, dragging Blake toward a bubbling fountain surrounded by a playful pack of dogs. Among them knelt a young woman with a bright, easy smile. Her laugh carried in the wind as she tried to corral a hyper terrier. "Duke, slow down," Blake called out. The woman looked up just as Duke bounded toward her. "Well, hello there, handsome," she said, rubbing behind Duke's ears. Blake jogged up, slightly winded. "Sorry, he gets a little excited around new faces." "No worries," she smiled, brushing her auburn bangs from her cheek. "He's got good energy. You can tell he's well-loved." Blake glanced at the other dogs clustered nearby. "All these yours?" "Oh, no," she laughed, standing. "I'm Riley. I'm a dog walker. These are my regulars." Riley Jensen was 26, with sun-kissed skin and freckles on her cheeks from long days outdoors. Her ponytail was messy, her hoodie faded, jeans scuffed at the knees, but she had a presence that was quietly magnetic. Her kindness didn't feel like an effort. It just was. She'd been walking dogs for 3 years, a job she stumbled into after life knocked her dreams off course. Riley had once planned to become a vet, but after her father passed during her senior year of high school, she put her future on hold. Medical bills mounted, and her mom's health declined. Riley worked whatever job she could, eventually finding comfort and peace in the company of animals. She wasn't bitter. Life had been hard, but Riley still believed in joy, in moments, not milestones. The wag of a dog's tail, the way leaves crunched underfoot, the smell of coffee at sunrise. Those things still made her smile. Blake had met thousands of people, executives, analysts, influencers, but something about Riley lingered after that encounter. Her honesty, her lack of interest in who he was, it felt like fresh air. A week later, when the chaos of his schedule returned, Blake didn't call the agency. He called her. Riley was surprised, but agreed without hesitation. From that day on, she became a familiar presence in Duke's life, and slowly, in Blake's. She'd arrive at the penthouse each afternoon, knock twice, and wait with that same easy energy. At first, their conversations were short, just polite hellos and leash handoffs. But slowly, something shifted. Riley would stay a little longer, sharing updates from Duke's adventures, which dogs he liked, which squirrels he tried, and failed, to chase, the way he stole a bagel from a distracted jogger. Her storytelling was vivid, like a movie playing in Blake's mind. And for the first time in a long while, he looked forward to those few minutes of color in his gray day. For Riley, Blake was different too. Most clients barely acknowledged her. Some forgot her name. But Blake asked questions. He listened, really listened. Their little moments became a quiet ritual. One afternoon, as she handed Duke's leash back, Riley said, You know, he's one of the happiest dogs I've ever met. He's lucky to have you." Blake chuckled, the corner of his mouth lifting in something genuine. "I think I'm the lucky one. He's probably my only real friend." "Dogs are like that," she smiled. "They bring out the best in us." Blake watched her disappear down the hallway, her laughter echoing faintly. And that night, standing once again at the window, he realized Riley was beginning to bring something out in him too. In the weeks that followed, Blake and Riley's brief exchanges slowly bloomed into something more, real conversations, the kind neither of them had expected nor planned. Each time Riley showed up to collect Duke, she brought more than just a leash and a smile. She brought color into the monotone rhythm of Blake's corporate life, a little sunlight through concrete. Blake had always kept his walls up, but Riley's warmth chipped away at them, piece by piece. Her stories were often about Duke, how he'd chase a squirrel halfway up a tree or try to adopt a pug half his size as his new best friend. Her voice carried laughter, her eyes sparkled with life, and she spoke about everyday things with sincerity Blake found disarming. He didn't understand why, but he found himself lingering at the door just to hear her finish her thought. Riley, for her part, had braced herself for Blake to be cold, maybe even arrogant, like most of the high-net-worth clients she'd encountered. But he surprised her. He was quiet, yes, but there was something attentive beneath that stillness. He didn't scroll his phone when she spoke. He didn't interrupt or rush her stories. And sometimes, when he thought she wasn't looking, she caught the faintest smile curve across his lips. He was clean-shaven, pale, and carried the kind of still energy that made people pay attention without knowing why. One blustery Friday afternoon, Riley showed up at the penthouse like she always did, wind in her hair, cheeks flushed with cold. Duke's tail thudded against the hardwood floor in excitement. But this time, Blake didn't just greet her with a leash. "Riley," he said, almost hesitantly, "can I ask you something?" She tilted her head. "Sure." He rubbed the back of his neck, a rare crack in his composed demeanor. "I've got this business dinner tomorrow night. Kind of formal. Lot of suits and stiff handshakes. And I was wondering, would you come with me?" Riley blinked. "Me? To a business dinner?" Blake nodded. "I know it's unusual, but I need someone I trust. Someone real. You don't try to impress people. And I don't have a lot of that in my life." Her heart thumped. She wasn't sure what surprised her more, the invitation or the vulnerability in his voice. She looked down at her hoodie and jeans. "I don't think I exactly scream business dinner material." Blake smiled, a genuine one this time. "You'll be fine. Just be yourself. That's all I'm asking." After a pause, Riley nodded. "All right. If you're sure, I'll go." That evening, as she walked home, a quiet buzz of excitement settled over her. She'd never been to anything formal, much less something involving high-powered executives and multi-million-dollar handshakes. What if she embarrassed herself? Or worse, embarrass him? She was determined not to. The next day, she borrowed an elegant deep green dress from her best friend, Marissa. She spent extra time taming her curls, applying makeup with careful hands, not to transform, but to feel confident. When she arrived at Blake's penthouse just before sunset, she felt more nervous than she expected. But the moment Blake opened the door, dressed in a tailored navy suit, tie knotted with surgical precision, his eyes widened ever so slightly. "You look incredible," he said, voice soft. Riley laughed lightly. "Let's hope I don't trip over my own shoes tonight." "You won't," he said, offering his arm. "And even if you did, you'd still outshine everyone in the room." The venue was everything she imagined and more, a grand ballroom shimmering with chandeliers, glass walls framing the glowing skyline. Waiters in crisp white jackets floated by with champagne flutes and silver trays. It was like stepping into a movie. As they entered, the room shifted. Conversations paused. Heads turned. Whispers spread, not cruel, but curious. Most of these people were used to seeing Blake with polished socialites, all power players in heels and designer labels. Tonight, he walked in with someone entirely different, younger, softer around the edges, wearing a borrowed dress and quiet confidence. Riley felt it, the eyes, the assumptions, the silent judgments. Her grip tightened slightly around Blake's arm. "Are you sure this was a good idea?" she whispered. "Trust me," Blake replied without hesitation. "You'll be just fine." Soon, they were approached by a cluster of sharply dressed men and women, investors, partners, board members. Blake introduced Riley simply as a friend, and though they all smiled politely, she could see it, the subtle questioning in their eyes. At dinner, the conversation floated around metrics and mergers, market movements, and tech forecasts. Riley stayed quiet, unsure where, or whether, she fit. But then she began to notice something. For all their polish and suits, these people seemed oddly disconnected. Their words were intelligent, but their feet never touched the ground. They spoke of losses and stress, but not in ways that felt real. At one point, a silver-haired guest sighed dramatically about the mental toll of running $1 billion firm. Riley couldn't help it. She chuckled. "What's funny?" the man asked, narrowing his eyes. Riley froze for a second, then exhaled. "My neighbor owns a tiny diner. She works double shifts and still finds time to bake cookies for the kids in our building. When she talks about stress, it's about keeping the lights on. Perspective's funny like that." The table went quiet. Her cheeks burned. But then Blake leaned in, his voice calm. "She's right," he said. "Sometimes we forget what real struggle looks like." The tension broke. A few heads nodded. Glasses clinked. And slowly, the air changed. From there, Riley let go a little. She told stories about the dog she walked, Duke's jealous bark, Chihuahua who refused to walk more than 4 steps at a time. Her humor was natural. Her honesty, refreshing. People leaned in, laughed, even forgot to check their watches. By the end of the night, those same skeptics who had whispered behind flutes of champagne were laughing along with her. As the dinner came to a close, Blake guided Riley out onto a quiet terrace. The wind was cooler now, brushing past him like a sigh. "You were amazing tonight," he said, leaning on the railing beside her. Riley laughed, cheeks pink from the cold. "I don't know about amazing. I just tried to be honest." "That's why it worked," Blake replied, looking at her. "You didn't try to impress anyone, and still, you did. You reminded me and them of what really matters." Riley met his eyes, something gentle in her smile. "You know," she said, "you're not exactly what I expected either, Blake." "When I first met you," Riley said softly, eyes flickering toward the skyline, "I thought you'd be, well, a typical millionaire." Blake turned toward her, his voice low and sincere. "And you're more than I ever could have imagined." The words hung between them, delicate and full. Under the cold shimmer of city lights and distant traffic hum, something warm flickered to life, something unspoken, yet unmistakably real. For the first time in a long while, Blake felt it. Hope. And for Riley, standing on that terrace beside him, she began to wonder if this unexpected connection might lead to something far deeper than she'd ever dared dream. The grand hall buzzed with opulence. Crystal chandeliers sparkled overhead, casting golden light onto polished marble floors. Guests in designer gowns and tailored tuxedos mingled across the room, champagne flutes in hand and laughter echoing under the vaulted ceiling. Blake had spared no expense. This was one of the most exclusive venues in the city, known for hosting Fortune 500 galas and political fundraisers. It was meant to impress. And yet, all he could think about was Riley. She wore a simple floor-length black dress her friend Marissa had lent her. It wasn't high fashion, but it fit her like it was made for her, highlighting her natural beauty in a way no label ever could. Her auburn hair was loosely styled, a few wisps falling naturally around her face, and the only jewelry she wore was a thin silver bracelet, one her mom had given her when she turned 18. She looked like herself, and somehow she looked like she belonged. Still, Riley felt the nerves swirl in her stomach. She knew she didn't fit into this world, not really, and it didn't help that she could feel the whispers following them as Blake guided her through the ballroom. "Who's she with?" That's not Blake's usual type. "She's a dog walker," someone murmured behind a glass of rosé, followed by a quiet, knowing chuckle. Riley kept her head up, spine straight. She'd heard worse. She wasn't going to let their shallow assumptions ruin the evening, or what she was beginning to feel around Blake. Blake, for his part, heard the whispers too, but he didn't flinch. His attention never wavered from Riley. "You're doing great," he said quietly, leaning close as they neared their table. Riley gave a tight smile. "Let's just say it's been an interesting start to the night." The table was full of Blake's closest allies, seasoned VCs, founders, and a few high-stakes investors he hoped to win over. Riley found herself seated between Blake and a silver-templed man named Mitchell Drake, a partner at a prestigious venture firm known for backing unicorn startups. The conversation began as expected, heavy on market forecasts, exit strategies, seed valuations. Riley listened closely, trying to keep up, though the jargon quickly blurred into noise. Eventually, Mitchell turned toward her with a practiced smile that didn't quite reach his eyes. "So, Riley, what line of work are you in?" "I'm a dog walker," she said plainly, holding his gaze. He raised an eyebrow. "Dog walker? That's not the usual company Blake brings to these things." A few nearby ears perked up. Riley felt heat crawl up her neck, but she didn't look away. "Maybe not, but it's surprisingly rewarding. Dogs don't care how many investors you've got. They just care who you are." Mitchell chuckled, a dry note in his voice. "Fair enough. Bit of variety's good for the table, I suppose." Blake stepped in smoothly. "Riley's one of the most thoughtful people I know. She notices things most of us are too distracted to see." The comment landed like a stone in water. Mitchell looked away, caught off guard. Dinner continued. The group began discussing a new project Blake's team was working on, an app to streamline urban logistics for small businesses. It was a big pitch, something that could shift how neighborhood vendors connected to delivery and inventory systems. The conversation swirled with technical talk, APIs, back-end optimization, market saturation. Riley stayed quiet at first. This wasn't her world. But as she listened, something struck her. No one was talking about real people. Not the users, not the challenges actual small business owners faced. She hesitated, then spoke. "Sorry to interrupt, but have you considered how this would work for someone who's not tech-savvy?" The table went still. All eyes turned toward her. "What do you mean?" one of the younger investors asked, brows raised. Riley took a breath. "I know a lot of small business owners, dog groomers, pet shop folks, local trainers. Most of them can't spend hours learning a complicated app. If your system isn't simple, you'll lose them before you even get them." A few murmurs rose around the table. "And," she continued, gaining confidence, "you could take it further. Add a feature that connects small businesses with freelancers. I know so many people who'd kill for an app that helped them find quick gigs or part-time help in their area. You'd be building a community, not just a tool." For a moment, silence. Riley's heart pounded. Had she just made a fool of herself? Then one of the investors leaned forward. "That's actually a really smart idea. Blake, have you guys explored something like that?" Blake smiled, eyes fixed on Riley. "Not yet, but we will." She's absolutely right. The mood shifted. The skepticism from earlier gave way to curiosity. Questions flowed, not about her credentials, but about her insights. Riley shared what she knew from her clients and neighborhood, what real small business owners struggled with, what tools they wish existed, what made them quit using most apps after a week. Her answers were simple, honest, grounded, and for these suits around the table, oddly refreshing. Even Mitchell, who'd earlier brushed her off, was now nodding thoughtfully. By the time dessert arrived, he was asking Riley for her opinion on freelance service networks. And for the first time that evening, Riley didn't feel like an outsider. She felt like she belonged. "You've given us a lot to think about," said one of the investors with a nod, his voice no longer condescending, but respectful. As the crowd began to disperse and the polished clink of champagne glasses faded, Blake guided Riley toward the exit. The stares that had once carried whispers now followed with quiet murmurs of curiosity, and in many cases, admiration. Outside in the crisp night air, under a sky painted with stars and the glow of city lights, Blake turned to her. "You were incredible tonight," he said. Riley let out a soft laugh, still trying to absorb everything that had just happened. "I think I might have said too much." "No," Blake said, his expression calm but serious. "You said exactly what needed to be said. You reminded me what all of this is really about. Real people, real lives, not just spreadsheets and projections. For the first time that evening, Riley felt something shift inside her, a quiet confidence settling into place. She didn't feel like a guest anymore. She didn't feel like she was lucky to be here. She felt like she belonged, not because of what she wore, not because of who she stood next to, but because of what she offered, her mind, her heart, her truth. And for Blake, watching her stand her ground with such poise and conviction only deepened what he already felt growing inside. She wasn't just a kind soul who walked his dog. She was a force, a person who could make a room full of powerful people stop and think. She was changing the way he saw the world, and maybe even the way the world saw him. As the evening carried on, Riley relaxed into the rhythm of conversation. Where she had once hesitated to speak, now people leaned in to hear her thoughts. They didn't see her as an outsider anymore. They saw someone with insight, someone who mattered. Blake remained close by, offering subtle encouragement with every glance, every nod. And then, something unexpected. A man in his late 40s approached their table. Salt and pepper hair, perfectly tailored charcoal shoot, and a confident gait of someone deeply at home in high places. But as his gaze fell on Riley, his expression shifted, from polite curiosity to unmistakable recognition. "Riley Hart?" he asked, tilting his head. Riley froze, caught off guard by the familiar voice. Her breath hitched. "Professor Danvers," she replied, eyes wide. Blake looked between them, intrigued. "You two know each other?" Professor Danvers smiled warmly. "I taught Riley back at the University of Pennsylvania. She was one of the brightest students I ever had the privilege of mentoring." The surrounding guests fell quiet, subtly tuning in. Riley's cheeks flushed. She shifted slightly in her seat, suddenly feeling the weight of too many eyes. "I had to leave," she said softly, lowering her gaze. Danvers nodded, his voice tinged with regret. "Yes, her mother became ill. Riley had to drop out before graduation, though she was on track to finish with honors in both business and economics. It was a real loss for the academic community." The words hit Blake like a wave. He had known Riley was smart. He'd always admired her perspective. But he hadn't known the depth of her sacrifice. He couldn't help but ask, "Why didn't you ever tell me?" Riley met his eyes, her voice low but steady. "It's not something I talk about. My mom needed me. That was the only thing that mattered." There was a tremble beneath her calm, not weakness, but a vulnerability Blake hadn't seen before, and it only made him respect her more. But the room wasn't as kind. A woman nearby leaned toward her partner, her voice sharp enough to cut glass. "That's sweet, but convenient, isn't it? Dropping out of school, showing up here with someone like Blake? Doesn't that sound like a story written to impress?" The man beside her gave a soft laugh. "Sure does. She's certainly landed on her feet." The implication was clear. Riley heard it. She straightened slowly, her shoulders pulled back, her hands curled into fists at her sides, but when she spoke, her voice was calm, clear, and utterly unshakable. "You're right," she said, locking eyes with the woman. "I did land on my feet, not because of luck, not because I charmed my way in, but because I worked for it." The room went still. Even the servers paused. "I didn't get to finish my degree, but every day since, I've done everything I can to build a life I can be proud of. I walk dogs. I clean apartments. I've held 3 jobs at once. I've been broke, scared, and completely overlooked. And none of that makes me less than anyone here." Her voice never wavered. "You don't have to like me, and I'm not here to impress you. But I won't stand here and let you shrink me into a convenient little narrative. I'm not a footnote in someone else's story. I'm Riley Hart, and I'm proud of every part of who I am." A beat of silence, and then subtle nods, raised eyebrows. Even from the harshest critics, there was no denying the strength in her voice. The room had judged her, and she had stood her ground with more grace and grit than they were used to seeing. Blake looked at her, awestruck. She wasn't just remarkable, she was extraordinary. He reached across the table, gently taking her hand. "You're incredible, you know that." Riley gave a small smile, her eyes still damp from holding back so much. "I'm just me." "And that," he said, tightening his grip ever so slightly, is more than enough. As the night came to a close, people weren't whispering about Riley anymore. They were talking about her, respectfully, with genuine curiosity. Professor Danvers caught her on the way out and smiled. "I always knew you were meant for something bigger," he said, his voice warm. "Tonight, you proved it." "Thank you," she replied, voice soft but sure. Outside, Blake and Riley walked into the cool midnight air, where Duke waited patiently in the back seat of Blake's black SUV, tail thumping against the leather seat. As Blake opened the door for her, he turned with a look she hadn't seen before, something quiet, almost reverent. "I don't think I've ever been prouder to know someone," he said. Riley glanced up at him, her voice barely above a whisper. "Even if I don't fit into your world." Blake shook his head. "Riley, you don't just fit. You elevate it." In that moment, Blake knew then, he didn't just admire Riley. He needed her. And for the first time in her life, Riley didn't feel like she was being measured by what she lacked, but seen for everything she was. That night would become a turning point, not just in their relationship, but in the way both of them saw the world. Inside the grand hall, a strange stillness lingered. Riley's fearless defense of her choices had left the room stunned. The judgmental stares and whispering voices had vanished, replaced by something more complicated. Respect, discomfort, even guilt. Blake could feel the tension rolling off her as she slipped quietly back into her seat beside him. Her back was straight, her chin lifted, but he knew the courage it had taken for her to stand alone in a room like this and not back down. He couldn't let her face it alone. Blake stood up again, his tall frame instantly drawing attention. The hum of conversation faded. Champagne flutes were set down. All eyes turned. He cleared his throat. "I'd like to say something," Blake said. His voice wasn't loud, but it carried. Deep, clear, unshakable. He looked around the table, then locked eyes with Riley. Riley Hart is one of the most remarkable people I've ever met. The ripple of surprise was visible. A room full of powerhouses caught off guard. "When I first met her," Blake continued, "I noticed how easily she connected with others, especially my dog, Duke. But as time went on, I realized she sees everyone like that, with this quiet grace and genuine kindness that's hard to find these days." He paused, let the silence stretch just long enough for the weight of his words to land. "This is a woman who works harder in one day than most of us do in a week. She's faced things, loss, sacrifice, hardship, that many of us will never have to imagine. And she came through it not bitter, but better, with integrity, with humility. And tonight, she's shown a kind of courage most of us only talk about." Several guests looked away, uncomfortable, ashamed. "But some of you still see her as just a dog walker," Blake said, his tone sharpening ever so slightly. "I see her as real, as honest, as someone who doesn't pretend to be more, because who she is already means everything." His eyes softened, turning back to Riley. His voice dropped, but everyone still heard it. "She's changed how I see people, how I see the world, and I'll always be grateful for that." Riley blinked back tears, one she hadn't even realized had welled up. Blake's words cut past every wall she'd ever built around herself. Not just because they were kind, but because they were true. Blake sat back down beside her, and the room, slowly, awkwardly, erupted into scattered applause. Some guests looked sincere. Others looked like they weren't sure how to respond. Blake didn't care. He leaned in and asked softly, "You okay?" Riley nodded. A faint, trembling smile tugged at her lips. "Thank you," she whispered. "You didn't have to do that." "Yes, I did," Blake said, "and I'm not done yet." Riley blinked in confusion as he stood up again and faced the crowd one last time. "Thank you all for your time tonight," he said, "but I think I'll be heading out early." A few heads tilted. Murmurs rose. Blake smiled as his eyes flicked back to Riley. "I realize there's something way more important waiting for me outside. Duke probably needs a walk." A ripple of laughter rolled through the room, the kind that broke tension in the best possible way. Blake turned to Riley and held out his hand. "Shall we?" She hesitated only a second before placing her hand in his. Together, they stepped away from the table and out of the room, leaving behind the judgment, the false smiles, the glass ceilings, Outside, the air was crisp and clear, a welcome contrast to the tight-laced tension of the ballroom. Duke was waiting in the back seat of Blake's car, tail thumping wildly the moment he saw them. Riley knelt to greet him, her arms wrapped around his golden fur as he licked her cheek with joyful abandon. For a moment, the whole world seemed to pause, quiet and soft. Blake handed her Duke's leash. "Walk with me." Riley looked up at him. Her smile returned, this time brighter, freer. "You're really ditching your own dinner for this." Blake shrugged. "What's the point of staying? The best part of my evening is right here." They began walking along a tree-lined path just beyond the venue's lot, where the hum of traffic was low and the stars peeked through the city haze. Duke trotted between them like a kid who just won a prize. "You didn't have to stand up for me like that," Riley said after a while. "I know," Blake replied, "but I wanted to. You deserve to be seen, the real you, not judged by people who have no idea what they are looking at." Riley glanced at him, her heart tightening in her chest. "You're not what I expected, Blake Carter." He chuckled. "Neither are you, and thank God for that." They walked a little further in silence, the kind that didn't need filling. Then Blake stopped, turned to face her. Riley paused, curious. "What is it?" she asked. Blake smiled, soft, crooked, boyish. "Nothing. Just thank you for being you." Riley laughed. "You're a strange man, Blake Carter." "Maybe," he grinned, "but at least I'm finally learning from someone who actually knows what matters." They kept walking, Duke occasionally tugging on the leashes to keep them moving forward. And with every step, Riley felt something she hadn't felt in years, something fragile, yet warm. Hope. Blake had left a room full of prestige and power to stand beside her, and not for how she looked, or what she did, or what she could offer, but because he saw her, truly saw her. And Blake, for the first time in years, Blake realized he was exactly where he needed to be, not in boardrooms or penthouse suites, but here, walking beneath city lights with a girl who didn't try to impress him, because she already had, just by being real. "Thank you, Blake," Riley said softly, her voice nearly lost beneath the whisper of wind brushing through the trees. Blake glanced at her. "For what?" "For standing up for me in there," she replied. "You didn't have to. You could have just let them talk." Blake stopped walking, turned toward her. "I couldn't let them treat you like that," he said firmly. "You've done nothing but be yourself, and that's more than enough. If they can't see your worth, that's their failure, not yours." His voice didn't waver, not once, and for Riley, that conviction, raw and real, was too much. Tears stung the corners of her eyes, but she turned away quickly, embarrassed. They kept walking in silence for a while, Duke trotting happily ahead of them, leash loose in Riley's hand. Then Blake spoke again, softer this time. "You know, when I first hired you to walk Duke, I didn't think anything of it. You were just another face, another name in my calendar, someone who'd come and go." He chuckled. "But I started looking forward to seeing you, to your stories, to the way you treated Duke like he was more than just a job." He paused and looked at her. It reminded me of something I hadn't felt in years. Riley raised an eyebrow. "What's that?" "Joy," he said, simply. "Unfiltered, honest joy. You brought that back into my life. And tonight, when I saw you standing your ground like that, I realized just how much you changed me." Riley didn't know what to say. She wasn't used to being spoken to like that, not as someone who needed fixing or saving, but as someone who mattered. They reached a worn bench by the path and sat today. Duke plopped down at their feet with a satisfied grunt, chewing on a stick like he'd just won a prize. For a while, neither of them spoke. Riley stared at the gravel beneath her feet, thoughts racing. All her life, people had looked at her and seen what she wasn't. The girl who didn't finish school. The one who worked small jobs and wore thrift store jackets. The one who didn't belong in rooms like that dinner. But Blake, he didn't look at her like she was less. He saw the real her strength, her heart, her capacity to find joy in a wagging tail or warm morning coffee. And for the first time, she wondered if she'd been selling herself short all along. "You've given me a lot to think about," she said finally, voice barely louder than the breeze. Blake turned toward her, curious. Good things, I hope. She nodded, hesitating. Good, but scary. I've spent a long time keeping my guard up, being independent. Letting someone in? That's new for me. Blake's expression softened. I get that. Riley gave a small laugh. You polished, successful, powerful. She gestured to herself with a shrug. I'm just me. Blake reached over and took her hand. Warm, steady. None of that matters to me, he said. Not your resume, not your bank account. What matters is how you make me feel. She blinked. You make me want to be better, he added, to see the world the way you do. And I've never had that before, not from anyone. Riley stared down at their joined hands, her pulse thudding in her ears. For so long, she'd built walls, carefully laid brick by brick to keep herself from getting hurt. But here he was, standing outside them, not demanding she tear them down, just asking to be let in. And for once, she wanted to try. Okay, she whispered. Okay. Blake echoed, confused. Riley looked up at him, her smile slowly widening. Okay, let's see where this goes. But you've got to promise me something. Anything, Blake said, without hesitation. No games, she said seriously. No pretending. Just you. Blake nodded. You have my word. She nodded back, a little teary, a little brave. A silence fell again, but this one wasn't heavy. It was calm, peaceful. Then Riley tilted her head with a grin. You know, I'm not sure how Duke feels about sharing his favorite human. Blake burst out laughing, relaxed and real. I think he approves. Pretty sure he's been rooting for us from the start. Right on cue, Duke wagged his tail and rolled onto his back like a satisfied old man claiming victory. They both laughed, and as they stood to leave, walking side by side beneath the streetlights, Riley felt lighter than she had in years. Not because someone else had given her value, but because someone had finally seen the value she carried all along. Blake, too, felt different. Not just happier, but healed. For years, he'd surrounded himself with boardrooms, data points, and numbers. But Riley had reminded him what it meant to be real, to be present. It wasn't grand gestures or lavish gifts. It was this, a quiet walk, a shared laugh, a simple promise. And that night, under the hum of distant traffic, the stars blurred behind city haze, and a golden retriever trotting proudly between them, two people from different worlds began building something that felt extraordinary, not because it was perfect, but because it was true. The months following that unforgettable evening at the business dinner marked a quiet transformation in both Blake and Riley's lives. What began as a series of small, chance encounters had grown into something neither of them had expected, something real. With Riley's steady presence and Duke's constant tail-wagging joy, Blake began to reevaluate his priorities. The endless chase for deals and headlines had left him hollow, and he finally saw it. He started stepping back, delegating more, trusting his team, and reclaiming the life he'd forgotten he even wanted. For the first time, his calendar made room for lazy Sunday mornings, for spontaneous park walks, and for evenings filled with laughter instead of conference calls. Blake also stepped into Riley's world, a world not of boardrooms and billion-dollar deals, but of muddy paw prints and wagging tails. He helped her host events at the dog center, learn how to trim Duke's nails without a fuss, and even master the art of baking homemade peanut butter treats for the dogs. The work didn't impress investors, but it filled his heart in ways money never could. Meanwhile, with Blake's encouragement, Riley brought her long-buried dream to life, Paws and Hearts, a community-centered dog training and wellness space. It wasn't glamorous, but it was hers, and it thrived, not because of big marketing budgets, but because of the love, care, and honesty Riley poured into every single detail. One golden afternoon, the trio strolled through the park, Duke leading the way with his tail held high like a proud little flag. The breeze was soft, the leaves danced, and for once, there was no rush. You know, Riley said, glancing at Blake with a shy smile, I never imagined my life turning out like this. Good or bad? He teased. She laughed, brushing a loose strand of hair behind her ear. Better than I ever let myself hope. Blake stopped walking. His expression turned thoughtful. You've made my life better too, Riley. Not because of anything you've done, but because of who you are. You reminded me that happiness isn't about winning. It's about being with the right people and doing what actually matters. Riley reached out and gently squeezed his hand. You believed in me when I didn't believe in myself. I'll never forget that. Duke barked, clearly impatient to keep moving, and they both laughed. Their story wasn't the kind told in fairy tales. There were no glass slippers, no sweeping declaration from balconies. But what they had was deeper. It was earned, not gifted. Their connection had been built slowly, through kindness, respect, and the quiet courage to be vulnerable. Blake had learned that love wasn't found in boardrooms or behind closed doors, but in the soft glances shared during morning walks and in the unwavering loyalty of a woman who never pretended to be anything other than herself. And Riley discovered that being enough was never about what she had or didn't have, but about having the strength to stand tall, to love deeply, and to be proud of the journey that brought her here. As the sun dipped low, painting the sky in shades of amber and rose, they found a quiet spot on the grass. Riley leaned against Blake's shoulder. Duke lay between them, snoring softly. No words were needed. The silence said it all. And maybe that's the real magic, not in the noise or the glitter, but in the stillness of a moment that feels like home. Thank you for joining us on this journey. Blake, Riley, and Duke's story is a gentle reminder that true worth isn't measured by wealth or success, but by the lives we touch, the love we share, and the courage to be unapologetically ourselves. If this story moved you, like, share, and subscribe for more heartwarming tales. Until next time, remember, sometimes the simplest joys lead to the most extraordinary lives. Paw prints.